Okay, here we are on Wednesday, September 13th, with Arena and Jeff, with our little bonus teaching class here for the stalwarts of the training this fall, which is going to be postponed indefinitely. I did want to just take a second, just with both of you, before we leave. I've given some thought. Larissa's not coming tonight, as far as I know, unless she shows up unexpectedly. And so you both came out of this course recently. So you have a foot up. So I wanted to make sure I did something that really matched where you were at and would be something really new, but also kind of basic and important. So I think I figured that out. But before I do that, I just want to see where the two of you are at. Where is your enthusiasm for doing a Constellation training with me? Just share where you're at. Jeff was just sharing a little bit. Arena, what are your thoughts right now?
Well, I was kind of bummed out that it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to it. Yeah, and I guess that's where I'm still at. I really just wanted to do Constellation, but if, Constellations work, but I just don't have any training. So I was looking forward to get something to get me started with that.
Yeah.
But, it is what it is. So I'm still excited to learn some basics, something.
Well, and maybe is what I'll be offering, because I've had a bunch of people reaching out to me for online Constellation training.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you can do 100% Constellation training online, mm-hmm. because part of it is about feeling the group. And you can feel a lot of it on Zoom, but it's not the same as being in a circle. It just isn't.
Right.
I agree.
But maybe what I'll be doing is offering up like a 5 to 8 week online training. I was just telling Jeff I'm going to do something this fall. Mm-hmm. I just need to step back and rethink a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then maybe have an optional module for the people who want to do something live in the Bay Area. Mm-hmm. Just so we can open it up to some more people. You're in the Bay Area, right, Arena?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it would be good, because I know Amy also wanted to put like a practice group together. I think it would be easy to get maybe 6 people to practice together, and maybe you can come as a supervisor, and it could be a separate, it could be kind of like a theory class online and a practice class, and they separate maybe.
Right. I would just have to make sure that the online people are getting a robust experience too.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Right.
If I'm going to sort of tout it as a online training.
Right.
Yeah. Let's see what's possible. The supervision groups, I've tried this. People are not very willing to spend money on supervision groups.
Oh, really?
Just to practice under supervision.
Mm-hmm.
So that can often get a little trickier in terms of making sure that I'm making the compensation I need to make for the time that I'm putting in.
I was thinking because it's okay.
But that's I'll retouch base with you about that, Arena, because I want to hear from everybody about what they might like locally, as well as in like the Constellations for Individuals was able to involve people at some distance, which is great.
Right.
Okay, and Jeff, you want to just share again kind of where you're at so Arena hears you?
I don't remember what I said.
Then start afresh.
Yeah, I don't know. I agree, that you can't do it all online. I mean, for me, I get um, a lot clearer input, I guess, when we're in person. And um, I guess what I would like to get most is some more insight into, okay, Constellation set up, figured out who needs to be in it. Now, where does it go from there? I mean, a lot of it's asking, observing what the people are feeling and all that, but um, you know, more of what the facilitator brings to the party, as far as suggesting try this or say this, that kind of thing.
Got it. So the mentoring around how to facilitate in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I can see, it's fairly easy to see who needs, at least initially, who needs to be in the constellation, all that, and setting it up and checking in with people. That part seems fairly straightforward, but then, how do you move things along from there?
Okay. Yeah. That's the thing that most people, I mean, even the first, sort of 15, 20 minutes of a constellation are often, you're just gathering information. But it's that point where it becomes time to start making decisions that's where people get the stage fright. That's where like, I don't know. So absolutely. That's really helpful. And that's where I think we'll focus this weekend.
Mm-hmm. Can I just add some or mention?
Please.
Yeah. So for me, it's also the resolution, and I always think about like what is it that really heals, and what is it that changes, transforms, and sometimes when I do, it's like when we did individual constellations, and we kind of like played with it, but then like how to end it, how to resolve it, that was kind of hard for me. Like, okay, we said this, it seems like there's not as much tension. Is this it? Like, that's the we healed and can go home.
Well, and the question there is, what is the outcome?
Yeah.
I mean, healed and go home is probably not a resolution for anything, almost.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whether it's a massage or an EFT session, right? When have we done the work we're meant to do with this person?
Right. Yeah.
Which can sometimes look pretty messy, and sometimes it can look incredibly neat and tidy. And in neither of those instances do we know what that means in terms of when someone goes home. Right. What's gonna end up being manifested. Some of the tidiest resolutions end up without much change, and sometimes the messiest ones, people like in a month say, "Oh my God, I'm so much better."
Right.
Yeah, and how do you keep things moving without necessarily thinking that you even know what the resolution should be?
Right.
Yeah. Right. Okay, so this is also sort of all about inquiring with the field. There's this whole thing, we trust the field to answer all these questions. Mm-hmm. So the next question is how, but still to sort of say, okay, rather than applying a resolution, what is the resolution that wants to come through? Yeah. that the field is sort of holding out to us in some way. So this is really good. This is really helpful. I'm not sure we're going to deal with much of that tonight, because what I thought I'd like to do, one of the pieces of feedback that I got about the constellations for individuals was that they wished the last lecture had been the first one, because it began to really open the topic of interviews. And so, I mean, your question, Jeff, about, once you get into it, what do you do? Well, the ability to discern what you do is partly determined on whether you've done a good interview, right? I mean, all of these things kind of stack onto each other, right? Really good interview leads to a good start, leads to, blah, 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 blah. So,
yeah, that's another question I've been thinking about is, just how is that what's the best way to progress through that interview? Do you get like an entire family history back to the Mayflower, or, I mean,
back to Adam and Eve, right? So let me do a share screen and talk a little bit about interviews. And then I thought I would interview you both on an issue that you might like to constellate, but we're not going to constellate it. And hopefully what you notice in the interviews, first of all, you'll get to watch each other's. And because this is for the purposes of learning, I'm going to invite you to interrupt the interview if you have a question about what I'm doing, and for the interviewee to be able to tolerate that, so that we can be about learning here a little bit. But first, let me start out with just doing a little bit of lecture here. So I'm going to do a share screen. Okay. So, can you all see this?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So interviewing. The first thing is, this is from NLP, but it's about establishing rapport. And the important thing is that rapport is something you actually want to maintain with the client from the beginning of the interview to the end of the constellation, or the end of your interaction with the client. So what is rapport? This is a word from NLP. This is not about being warm or nice, although being warm or nice or friendly are perfectly nice. Rapport is something much, much deeper. It's kind of, if either of you have ever been interested in the sort of horse whisperer stuff, the joining up with the horse, when the horse kind of hooks up with the trainer, yeah. Rapport is what you have often with a boyfriend or a girlfriend in that really good phase of the relationship, or a good friend, or a teacher you just sync with. It's kind of being on the same page. She or he just gets me, and I don't have to try too hard, yeah? We have natural rapport with people all the time. And there are other people we have a really hard time having rapport with, right? I'm sure you could think of several very, very quickly. It has to do with very subtle cueing we're doing with each other, whether it's someone sitting next to us on a bus, or going on a blind date, or going to a class. Very subtle cueing that communicates to our lower brain, way down here, if the other person is of like kind. Am I with a fellow gazelle, or am I with a potential lion? It really is safety stuff. It's predator stuff. It's very unconscious. It's going on in a very deep place. And the most effective constellations happen with practitioners and clients who are in rapport in the interview and remain in rapport more or less throughout the constellation. This is why one of the things that when I start getting into talking about facilitating itself, I'll talk a lot about touching base over and over again with your client in order to make sure that you're keeping rapport with your client. Being in rapport, again, is not about being friendly or nice or warm or interested, although all those things are fine. Rapport is really about that mirroring you do with people. So what you really want to do is get on the map of the client's experience of their problem. Really join with them there. And this is something I see a lot of alternative practitioners having trouble with, because they discover an amazing modality, whether it's NLP or EFT or massage or yoga or whatever it is, and they want to get the client on their map of their problem. I want you to see it my way, right? Let me start telling you about your ancestors and how important they are to you, right? Oh, I think that your problem has to do with transgenerational trauma, and their eyes glaze over, okay? Because you're moving too quickly to having them come onto your map of their problem, their eating problem or their food problem or their relationship problem or whatever it is. So you have to start out being with them with their problem. Very concrete ways to do this is using their words for their problem, avoiding jargon early on, mirroring back what they say to them as much as possible, and keeping track of the things that are important to them. Taking notes can be really helpful. You know, if they mention that their mother committed suicide, that's a detail you might not want to forget because it's important to them, right? That's important to them. If they said that their mother was unhappy in college, maybe not the most important detail, right? Sometimes clients will say a sentence in 3D is the way I put it. Something like, my life is like quicksand, and I struggle and struggle and I can't get out. And it just kind of comes out like really strong. And you're going to want to write that one down and later on say, so that quicksand, tell me more about that quicksand, right? And they'll go, oh, gazelle, right? And then there's this thing that I mentioned here, pace, pace, lead. This is more technical terminology from NLP. Pace is just a word that means the same as mirroring. And obviously, eventually, you do have a map called Family Constellations that you think could help your client, right? But you want to lead them into it, right? And so you do it by mirroring, being with, and then leading them somewhere, yeah? And seeing if they'll follow you there. So, you know, something like that quicksand, that's pacing, that quicksand you were telling me about, that sounds really, really difficult. Do you notice any connections with your ancestors when you think about quicksand? That was a bit of a lead into a new place, yeah? Right? The reason why I mention this is very frequently practitioners are just kind of like, they just shift gears into a different framework with the client and expect them to follow. Because very frequently, for instance, something that clients will do a lot of is get into a lot of story, right? And you know it's not very helpful. And you don't want them to get all bogged down in that. But if you just interrupt them and tell them we don't want to get in a lot of story, right, you could lose the client, the sense of connection, the sense of safety about it, right? So you want to help them move into a deeper space about the material you're looking for here, Okay? So rapport is really important. And as you're going along in the interview, you want to be noticing when the client's getting cranky with you, when the client is tuning out, when the client is kind of not responding very thoughtfully to your questions, there's a decent chance you've lost rapport, and they're signaling to you that they're not feeling very connected to you right now. And that's a time to come back, rebuild rapport, right? So that quicksand thing, I'm really curious about that. Could you say more about what that's like, say, at work? And then they'll go, oh, they've heard my words again. They've heard me. The nice thing about losing rapport is you can always get it back. If you notice that you're losing it, yeah, and then do something, adjust something to try and get back in rapport with the client. When you're watching me interview each other, watch me for when I seem to be losing rapport. If I will, it happens. It happens to me in almost every interview. But I'm noticing, and I'm paying attention, and I'm coming back, and I'm just putting a charger into my computer. See, I told you what I was doing so I wouldn't lose rapport, right? Like, why is Leslie ignoring me? Okay. So that's a great way to create rapport, by the way. Just explain what you're doing. Be really transparent about what you're doing with people. And if I notice I'm losing rapport with someone, I may say, I want you to notice I've just lost rapport. I'm going to try and get rapport back, right? Okay. This is really, really important, because if the client isn't experiencing rapport with you, I mean, remember, there's a degree to which all of us are a little resistant, maybe a lot resistant to what can unfold in constellations, because it's an unexpected framework, right? And we're making it, if they don't feel rapport with us, safety with us, connection with us, they may not be quite as ready to jump into this kind of challenging worldview that may be coming through in the constellation. Yeah? But if we sow the seeds of rapport really well in the interview, I mean, this comes to your question from before in the conversation, the resolution takes place in the client, in them. So the more they're in rapport with you and with the process, the more that resolution can come into them. It's not something that merely happens out in the field in the representatives, right? It needs to happen inside the client as well, okay? Okay, so that's rapport. I'm going to take a pause. Any questions about that? By the way, NLP, when you take NLP classes, they'll spend 3 months teaching rapport. So learning how to mirror and really track how joined up you are with the client. So this is a short lecture on something that's a skill we grow over time. Any questions about that before I go into the next part of this?
Yeah, I had a question when you said, I'm noticing I'm losing rapport. Let me try to get it back. Do you say it to the client out loud?
No.
No, okay.
Rarely. I mean, if I'm with someone who knows NLP jargon, I could easily say, I just lost rapport with you, didn't I? And they'll go, yeah. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I was going to say like that.
Right? But the average client, no, I would not do that. I would just, I would circle back to something we had rapport around, or some key words that they've used, some key ideas, and come back to them. That's
and would you say, because we did, because I'm a psychotherapy, right? You do a lot of like active listening and that kind of empathize, building like making sure you're empathetic,
right.
That first connection. So it sounds pretty similar to that. Like
it is similar. There's one difference though, is that often in active listening, what is taught is paraphrasing. which is putting the client's words into new words. And in rapport, you actually don't do that. You use the client's words. Studies show that actually using a different set of words is once again asking the client to come to your map of the issue.
Okay, yeah.
The words we choose to describe our problems, unbeknownst to us, are very precious to us.
Yeah.
They're linguistically and neurologically and I don't know, no, it's quicksand. It's not mud. Mud's not right. Quicksand is the word. And people will actually sometimes every once in a while, if I think a new word might be useful, I'll literally say, you didn't use this word. This is my word, but I'm wondering if it's like fill in the blank. And they'll go, no, or they'll go, yes, that's it, exactly. Because sometimes people, are excited about hearing the right word that they've been, looking for something. But I just literally say, you didn't use this word for that, but a word that's going on in my head is blah, blah, blah. Does that seem right? And then we've expanded. That's a little pace lead, but staying in rapport and being really transparent that it's my word for it. But every once in a while, a new word, like, I don't know, they're describing an issue of work and it's just been going on and blah, blah, blah. And I say, you haven't used this word, but I'm wondering if this resonates. It feels to me like you're yearning for mercy in this situation. And they'll go, oh God, yeah, mercy. I wish there was just a little mercy in this, right? And so we've expanded the frame a little bit. Yeah. But I'm really transparent when I bring in a new word. Yeah. But yeah, active listening. Yeah. And just staying with the client on their map of the experience. The thing about empathy, we have to be super careful. Two experiences of, say, procrastination, universal thing, procrastination. Let's say Jeff comes to me with an issue around procrastination that he wants fixed in a constellation. I've procrastinated. My experience of procrastination and Jeff's may be just different enough that I need to check. Because it may not be empathy, it may actually be my experience of procrastination. Yeah, that's coming into my mind and heart about what he's talking about. So it's important to stay really, really grounded in the specifics of the client's experience of things like procrastination that can be incredibly common. Yeah, or what a breakup is like. Or the loss of a parent, these things. You have to be really careful about the difference between empathy and mixing up your maps a little bit. So I just always come back to the specifics of the client's experience. Okay. Any other questions about rapport? And I'll role model this when I do the interviews. Okay, the next one I've talked about with you, but this is really, really useful. Again, the difference between primary and secondary emotions. I did this lecture in the class, so I'm not going to repeat it, but just to summarize, primary feelings give us strength and weight and dignity. They come and do their job and go. They tend to attract people in. Secondary emotions tend to be trauma-based and they repeat each other. And they tend to have an assertion of helplessness around them and powerlessness. They tend to eventually push people away. We want to, as much as we can, to help clients, even in the interview, to move into primary emotions about stuff. Yeah? And this can be tricky sometimes, but even just using things like, what's underneath that? What's important about that? What's the main thing underneath that? That kind of thing. Sometimes when someone's really struggling to describe their experience or the problem that they want to bring, I'll ask, if you could summarize it in a metaphor, and some people this just doesn't work at all. I'll flat out say some people don't work with metaphors, but maybe about 50% of the people, this is a really useful question. You know, and then I'll offer a few just to get them started. You know, is it a tidal wave? Is it being held at gunpoint? Is it being locked in a prison? And then they'll get the idea. And they'll so go, It's like continuously building a foundation and it keeps falling down. Oh. And there's something about getting a good metaphor that gets people into their primary feelings. The collateral thing is that sometimes the metaphors are very literal in the ancestral history. It can really give you something to look for when you're starting to move into the ancestral stuff. Who tried to build something a bunch of times and it kept falling down? I'm going to be on the lookout for this now. Or even you can literally ask the question, was there anyone in your family who had an actual, not a metaphorical, an actual experience like that? Yeah. But metaphors can really sometimes help people get into that space. As I said before, watch out for, oh no, I said about story. Watch out for too much interpretation. In the Bay Area, this is the great difficulty. People come pre-set up with their interpretations about why everything is. I just came out of this workshop at Mount Shasta, and the interviews trying to get people out of their interpretations of their problems was so much work. So instead of saying, I'm depressed and I don't want to be depressed, I can work with that. That's a problem, right? They would go, you know, I think because my father, you know, really wasn't happy in his work and I had to be there for my mom. And then I became the caretaker in the family. And I'm like, whoa, all this interpretation going on, right? So just, you can't cut it off. You can't be rude. You have to allow a certain amount, but you want to watch out for too much interpretation. This is something you may want to come back to in the recording. I invite you to take notes. When I'm on the phone with people, before my Rudra Mandir constellations in Berkeley, before I launch into, there are basically two stages in my interviews. The first one is the issue. I just want to get a good, clean, strong issue. And then I leap into the family tree interview, and that's very different. And I tell them that. I say, we're going to shift gears now. I'm really looking for dates and places and events. I'm warning, I may interrupt you from time to time because I'm trying to draw a tree. And I'm going to be very directive for the next 30 minutes or so as I go through this family tree. I'm not looking so much for psychological explanations, interpretations of how people got to be the way they are. I'm looking for big family traumas. The nice thing about Constellation's work is that, you know, these stories we have about how people got the way they were, they're not unuseful, but for whatever reason, we're stuck. And Constellation often gives us a new story. And this is why I'm not going to be paying as much attention to some of the explanations for how people got the way they were. Is that okay? And they'll go, sure. And then, yeah, and then I interviewed for the family tree. So I really do try and prep people a little bit around this, not bringing in the preloaded interpretations, right? Because you know, you've been in them family constellations. I mean, the example I use all the time is, you know, the mother and father fought your whole life. We bring in a representative for the mother and the father, and the first thing they do is hug each other, right? You now have a new interpretation of this relationship, a new understanding, a new frame for the relationship, yeah? And this is what family constellations does all the time. You're really wanting to get workable information and data, okay? and what I think of as family impacting trauma. And I'll get to that more in just a minute. At C here, I just want to say at the Mount Shasta event, excuse me, I'm talking too much. I only had a few minutes for an interview with people. That's a workshop context, or like in the Constellations for Individuals class. You just had a few minutes to get some good basic information. You're just trying to get enough info, and I put that in quotation marks, get enough info. Versus a thoroughgoing interview, which is what I do before, when I do the phone interviews with people before the Berkeley Constellations that I do, okay? And those take as much as 45 minutes. They both have pros and cons. Obviously, the pro of getting the thoroughgoing interview is you get a lot more information and you're less likely to miss something important. The downside is getting too much information. When I do the full tree, I often look at it and I'm like, oh, I don't know, instead of the thing kind of popping out. Yeah. So there are pros and cons to both. I always encourage facilitators to work with both. Yeah. Be in situations where you can only do 5 or 10 minutes. Be in situations where you can do a thorough interview. Okay. Try both. So now that you're into the family tree, what are you looking for? In general, I want to say these 3 things: traumas, secrets, and the outcast ones in families. The outcast or lost, maybe is a better way to put it, or lost ones, okay? So traumas are the Holocaust, Cherokee Trail of Tears, the whole family died in the house fire, 3 generations of sexual abuse, et cetera, yeah? Secrets, the lost loves, the betrayals that no one would talk about, the child born out of wedlock, that kind of thing. And then the outcast or lost ones, the one who went off to war and never came back, the children who died and were never mourned, the son who was thrown out of the family when he married the Jewish wife, you know, all of those. Those are big general buckets. Now, if we get more specific about those buckets, there's more to focus in on. Betrayals and violations, someone who stole money, affairs sometimes. War trauma, we know that's really important. Suicides and homicides, lost loves, mental illness and addictions. Immigration trauma can be very, very important. Loss of honor. That is someone who ran away from conscription, that kind of thing. You know, you've seen enough constellations, so you know the big things we're looking for. We're not looking for mom was depressed because she couldn't go to college when she was a kid, right? Those are not, generally speaking, the kinds of things we're looking for in constellations that remain unresolved and leave lingering the next generation wanting to help or fill in the systemic piece. While you're interviewing, you're also looking for, this is different from sort of data, the primary entanglement for the client. So if the client says, I'm depressed, what's the main thing in the family tree that you're going to guess is connected to that depression? It's just a guess. As Stefan Hausner puts it, you're looking for a hypothesis. Yeah? The primary, is it the Holocaust? Is it the children who died? Is it, what is it? Yeah? And things that are out of order, remember the orders of love. So people who didn't get to belong, people who are not in their right place in terms of seniority, transgression that went unacknowledged, an imbalance in giving and taking, yeah, all those orders of love. as you're listening to these stories, where are things that are out of order? You know, was the first child adopted out and then the second child was called the firstborn his whole life? That's something that's out of order. Also with a belonging, losing the adopted child. Yeah, so you're looking for these things that are out of order. So the whole purpose of this is to decide where to start your constellation. And you want to notice when you feel like the interview has given you a strong place to start and when it hasn't. I was kind of noticing that this weekend in Mount Shasta. I did about, I don't know, a dozen constellations. I would say 10 of them had really strong places to start and 2 just didn't, and I couldn't find it and I had to kind of leap in. Yeah. Where in the family tree the symptom of the client is the same or similar to something up in the tree. So depression or anxiety. Oh, the client has a lot of anxiety. Look at the uncle. He has the same anxiety going on. That sort of thing. Where you feel the most energy as you are listening to the client. And sometimes where the client, him or herself, asks for attention. Just because the client says, I really want to look at my grandma who committed suicide, I don't dismiss that. Sometimes that's just right, particularly if it's their first constellation. And particularly if it's something strong like the grandmother who committed suicide. I don't always do what the client says to start with. But I'll be transparent with them and I'll let them know why my attention is going somewhere else.
There was actually a question I had. Rather than necessarily a specific issue, you know something about your family history, and you just want to know more about that or find out if that's relevant or something like that.
Can you be more specific? I'm sorry, I'm not quite tracking the question.
Well, like the last thing you said, why my grandmother committed suicide, rather than the client saying, well, I have this particular issue, and that coming up as part of, you know, the constellation, he or she knows that grandma committed suicide, and you just want to see.
Yeah, I don't do that. Yeah. I will not do that. So I want to be clear about what I said. I'm assuming the client is coming to me for depression or anxiety, and she's saying, and in particular, I want to look at grandma's suicide because I think it's connected. Okay. Okay. I never do a constellation merely out of curiosity of an ancestral history of some sort or another. Okay. Sometimes clients do come to me because they have they you know, particularly when it's something like the Holocaust. They'll come and say, you know, my family is just, it's you can tell it's everywhere. I want us to deal with the Holocaust. So I'm like, fine, that's great. What's a present day thing that you would like different if we look at that? I always find I ask them to stand for a present day thing they would like different for themselves. And it could be, I'd like my relationship with my mom to be different. That's fine. That's present day. That's cool. Yeah. But whenever I feel like the interview is sneaking into the territory of we're here to fix the family tree for the sake of fixing the family tree, I circle it back to what's important to them now. And I'll say right out loud, I don't do constellations just to address trauma in your background. We all got trauma in our background. I do it so that your present day life can be improved. Okay? There are a lot of people these days who are coming with the framework. This is very interesting to me. I don't have it. You may have run into these people or it may be something you've been exposed to. But the idea that I am here in this incarnation to be a healer for my ancestors. This is not uncommon in certain California circles. Or there's some awareness, there's like coming to terms with a life of difficulty, like a lot of trauma and pain, and say, okay, it's my job in the family to address this so it stops with me and to heal the family pain. And I'm very motivated to help someone like to release that job for themselves. And to be able to be kind of selfish around focusing on what they want different today, while acknowledging, this is the slippery slope piece, from most people who look at constellations do have the belief that we are addressing the larger system in some way. So in a sneaky way, we are doing healing for the family tree. But I really do want to be careful about making that the primary motivation, because again, it makes the client big in their family. And that it's probably going to send them off into more pain if we leave them thinking, I did a good job healing my family today, right?
I was thinking more in terms of, well, I know this occurred. How might that be affecting me or my family?
Right, and I would still start with, what's your guess? What's something that, well, the fact is that I do think about death a lot. Okay. Would you like that to be different? I would. Okay. It doesn't have to be a lot, but there does have to be, it has to be something more than mere curiosity. I wonder if it's affecting us. I won't do that constellation. That doesn't feel respectful of grandmother and her suicide. Something kind of pokey about it. If it's mere curiosity, I leave the fate with grandma that happened.
Well, I guess what I'm thinking about is more than mere curiosity, but I don't know what the consequence of that might be.
Still there might be none. It's just curiosity.
Okay.
If you don't actually have an outcome you want different for yourself, you're just in the frame of curiosity. And here's the deal. If your grandmother committed suicide, there's almost certainly a consequence, and it's probably not subtle to anybody. Right? I mean, certainly the parent, so let's say it's mother's mother, the client is going to know something was hard for her mother as a result. I mean, that's not going to be subtle. She just had a hard time expressing her feelings. She had a hard time bonding with me. Oh, okay. And what consequence did that have for you? Well, it means that, I tend to not trust people very much. Ah, there we go. Right? If it's big enough that someone's curious about whether it's affecting them, then they have some data about how it's affecting them. And the interview can help bring it out, even if they haven't thought about it consciously. This is just way too important. It's got to be about a present day issue. This is really super important. This is part of the authority stuff, doing this stuff with weight. And we do not do constellations out of let's find out what's going on with the Trump administration. No. We don't, it's not our business. We're not going to do a constellation on that, right? Okay. Other questions about the interview before I leap into one?
Well, I was going to say too, with curiosity, it's also like it doesn't have a charge, right? Like it could be,
right.
Like sometimes it's kind of feels flat. And then I've noticed the constellation doesn't have like the energy to go.
Exactly.
And it's kind of like this surface. It's like it kind of becomes boring quickly. So it needs to be something. I feel like it needs to be something charged, and we need to get to like what you said, like the energy. Where is the energy here?
Well said. And that circles us back to the primary and secondary feelings. and the reason why we help clients get into their primary feelings. Very frequently, in a lot of workshops out there in the world, and Arena, you may have been exposed to these, where there's no single client, like at Mount Shasta, you're looking for the person who's going to raise their hand and say, I want a constellation. What the facilitator is looking is for someone with a strong issue, right? I judge that a little bit differently. I don't mind if someone's in secondary feelings when they raise their hand, because sometimes people can't get to primary feelings on their own, and I don't want to judge that too much. But there does need to be something that you can feel is actually real for them and actually important to them. Because sometimes if you get a large enough workshop going, people will raise their hand just because they want some attention. They want some focus on themselves for a little while, which is fine. But it's not a good enough reason to have a constellation done. Every once in a while, someone will raise their hand and they'll like say something, you know, sometimes, you know, I sort of fall behind in my work. And I'll say, oh, that sounds really hard. I don't feel enough there yet to do a constellation, but be with that, and I'll come back to you later. And then I'll come back to them later, and they'll say, well, the truth is I'm in danger of getting fired. Ah, okay. Right? Then we have something that the field can work with. And Arena is quite right. The field follows the weight of what we're doing. That's one reason for getting a very clear, strong issue. Because sometimes you'll have a client who will say, well, I have a relationship problem, and I'm depressed, and I have a work thing, and I have a money thing, and I'm mad at my mom, right? If we put all of those out into the field, you're going to probably get a super mushy constellation. If we focus the outcome the client wants, the field, my experience is the field takes that intention and works directly with it, and will give us the information we need for that issue. I mean, the whole question is how can the field reveal what we need when we need it? And it's because it's guided by our intentions, by the strength and weight and focus of our intentions. And if we put in mush, mush comes out. Put in something strong will come out. That's why part of the reason why the interview is so important, to help the client get into their primary feelings and a strong state and strong information. And sometimes I just don't know why, it's hard to find. And you just go forward with what you got, because it's what you got. Yeah. Sometimes the field will provide anyway, which is nice. Okay, other questions? Is this useful? Clarifying the interview a little bit? Yeah? A little bit of response from the crowd. Yeah? Yeah, helping to,
I could use just a little bit more on the primary, secondary mode. For some reason, that's not gelling very well for me. If maybe you could model what that looks like, or
Sure. How about we see if it comes up in the interview, and if it does, I will I'll point it out.
Okay.
Sound good? Arena, I assume you're okay. Are you tending to your little one, or just want to check that everything's okay?
I think she's muted.
Yeah. I'm going to unmute you for a second. Oh, see, the baby's crying. Okay, so we will definitely be starting with a interview with Jeff. Arena warned us that she was going to be alone, having to take care of her child this evening. By the way, I don't know if it'd help your baby if you had earbuds in, and then your baby wouldn't have to listen. So that's just a thought. Okay. So I've got you on mute now, Irina. Jeff, why don't we start with interviewing you on a topic?
It's always the hardest part for me in any of these things is coming up with an issue that I want to work on. Well, all right. How about I've never really had a very close relationship with my daughter.
Okay.
I think I know reasons for that, but or at least some reasons for it.
How old is your daughter?
Oh, well, she's an adult. I mean, she's like...
I figured that, but still.
45.
Okay. And what's her name?
Angelique, or just Angie, to me anyway.
Okay. So notice this is rapport. I asked Jeff his daughter's name. So whenever anyone's talking about a specific member of the family right off the bat as part of their issue, either a partner or a child, not necessarily a parent, I'll say, what's his name? What's her name? So I can refer to Angie rather than your daughter. Mm-hmm. Did you always not have a close relationship with your daughter? Notice I'm using the same words that Jeff used. Since babyhood, or did that happen at some specific point in your life?
When she was, I guess, from like toddler, you know, as a tiny baby, that wasn't an issue, but I don't know exactly what point, but just basically from a toddler on up, it was not very close. And, you know, and so at this point, thinking about what you said, I mean, I'm convinced I know some reasons for that, but I don't know if you want to hear that, or I don't know how you want to explore that.
I am interested in that. Hold on one second. I just want to check. Do you have other children?
Yeah, I have a son.
Older, younger?
A few years younger.
Okay. And would you say it's the same with him, different?
No, it's much, we have better rapport. Not that we're real close or see each other a lot, but it's just a more comfortable relationship, I guess.
Yeah. So at this point, I just want to say, I'm just getting basic useful information for anybody doing any work with anybody, right? This is the sort of basic stuff you need, right? Did you lose, children, these two children are same mother?
Yes.
You guys together, divorced?
We're divorced. We've been divorced for many years.
Okay. And sorry to ask this question, but did the two of you lose any children?
She did have an abortion before we got married.
With someone else or with you?
With me, yeah.
Okay.
We were pretty young.
Okay. So this is, you know, what Jeff said about I have some theories about the reasons why. There's no reason not to hear them. I mean, they could be in the category of interpretations, but he put it out there. It'd be a little rude to say, no, I don't want to know. Right? So what do you think the reasons are?
Well, I think my ex-wife was constantly trying to keep us apart. She's a compartmentalizer, if you know what I mean. She doesn't like the people in her life to communicate any more than necessary, because then it's harder for her to keep her stories straight. And I don't know, maybe there was a jealousy thing. I don't pretend to know the exact why, but looking back on it, it was pretty obvious that there was something going on there.
So your wife tried to keep you separate from Angie, but didn't try that so much with your son?
Yeah, it was much more blatant. More looking back on it, it was much more obvious with her than it was with him.
So your wife, didn't let you play with her or spend
No,
time
it's like
with her? Or?
It would be, I walk in the door, not even hello. Angie did this and she was getting into that and blah, 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 and you got to punish her, blah, blah, blah. So it took me, I got to admit, I was pretty stupid about the whole thing. It took a long time before I kind of figured out what was going on, and by then it was probably water under the bridge. But
yeah. And more recently, Angie's an adult. Have you and she ever talked about this not close relationship? Does she see it your way?
Our relationship is, well, we haven't talked much. How to put it? There's no animosity. It just kind of works out. We get along better when we don't interact too much. In the past, it is kind of. I mean, she got as a kid, a teenager, and a young woman, she got into all kinds of trouble, and it was like always, if I hear the phone ringing, it's like, it's going to be bad news. And there's still an element to that remains, even though hasn't happened for a long time. But sometimes I'm just sometimes I feel like I don't want to know, it's better if I don't hear about it. And again, that's like kind of a hangover from many years of problems. But I mean, we can talk, and so I guess cordial but distant, maybe.
Okay. And what would you like different? This is really important. You got to ask. So he described the problem. I don't have a close relationship with my daughter, but we haven't. This is the first question about a different outcome.
I guess I would just. I don't know what kind of relationship I want to have with her, but I would like not to have this knee-jerk reaction of, that's grown up over the years of.
Yeah.
I'm afraid sometimes. I'm afraid to talk to her because I'm afraid I'm going to hear a bunch of stuff that either makes me mad or is that I can't do anything about, or get sucked into some drama, or something like that. It would be nice not to feel that way.
Yeah. Yeah. So at 45 years old, she's still in a lot of drama?
There hasn't been much. I haven't heard about much partly because I don't, communicate with her that much. But so I don't honestly know what's going on with her right at the moment. We haven't talked in a few years. I get the impression like it's not so dramatic, but I'm almost afraid. It's like don't ask the question if you don't want to know the answer, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, to your question before, Jeff, about secondary versus primary,
Mm-hmm.
you're not in secondary feelings, but I just want to label what I'm about to do as moving into more primary feelings, just so that you can sort of notice it. This fear, you've mentioned it a couple of times. I'm afraid to talk to her, or I'm, don't ask what you don't want to know. I'm afraid. Just take a second and hang out with that fear. And let it deepen and strengthen a little bit. What's the real fear underneath it?
I guess I would say I'm afraid there's going to be some dramatic bullshit going on, and I'm going to feel like I'm expected to get involved and try to fix it, and from past experiences, I've done that, and it works for a week or a month, and that's back to the same thing, So I don't
And
like drama.
what's the worst? What's the worst part about being drawn in and trying to fix and it not working?
Just the futility of it, I guess. It's nothing. It's just sad. I mean, it's you watch it. It's kind of, again, I don't know what it's like now, but in the past, it's been kind of like, do I really want to watch this slow motion train wreck, or I can't do anything about it. It makes me upset. I don't even want to look at it.
So thank you. Let me ask a question. Is the worst part of this that as her dad, you can't help? It reminds you can't help.
In the sense that it doesn't do any good to try, or I haven't been able to. I mean, I can help in the short term, but in the long term, it doesn't help.
Because generally speaking, the dad's job, right, is to show up and help, right? Do stuff, get stuff done, help stuff, right? Dads often get their sense of meaning by, you know, look, that door's fixed. Oh, I helped my daughter stop crying. Yay. You know, whatever it is. And I'm wondering if way back when Angie was a toddler, whatever happened, this strange miscommunication between you and your wife, she, some kind of agreement, I don't know, it's complicated, but that you became a dad who couldn't help your daughter. Like that somehow became the rule.
Well, I mean, this is, I'm ashamed to say, for a long time in the beginning, I was convinced there was something wrong with her, because I'm an only child, so I didn't get a lot of, you know, modeling for parenting. My mother was, I think she was a very good mother. She was subtle. She disciplined me when I was young, when I needed it. But it was largely transparent to me. And I guess I just made the assumption in the beginning that, well, my wife would know how to be a parent, be a mother, you know. And I discovered, it took me a long time before I discovered she did not know. She did not have any skills in that direction, you know. So, but before I figured that out, it was like, well, Angie did this and Angie's doing that and blah. And I think, well, it's not, I mean, I wasn't even aware enough to ask the question if she was mothering her well. That was just such a deep assumption that I said, well, there must be something wrong with her, you know. You know, it took me a lot of years before I figured out that, yeah, what was wrong with her was her mother.
Aww.
I mean, she was diagnosed as a borderline personality at some point.
Yeah. Well, this is sad because you're still reacting to Angie as if there might be something wrong with her that you can't deal with.
Yeah, and well, and of course, you know, for her it was a kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Of course.
For most of her life, you know, just getting in trouble with this or having problems with that.
So here's, I mean, if, you know, best of all possible worlds, would it be nice to be able to connect with your daughter in a way that just assumes you're both okay? Drama or not?
That would be nice. But if there's there's that fear again. If there's drama going on, and I don't want to get sucked in, and yet I would feel guilty if I just say, you know, no, it's not my problem.
Yeah. So I'll just notice that there's this strong sense of self-protection that you have. Like you'd really like something to be different from Angie, but there's this thing you're wanting to protect yourself from as you move forward into it.
Yeah, definitely.
So we'll just respect that for now. And wouldn't it be nice if that could somehow be relaxed a little bit? Like if you didn't have to feel like you needed to protect yourself around your daughter. And that would probably be cool for her too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to say that I went into that a bit more than I normally would, partly because it's Jeff, partly because I wanted to do a little bit more modeling around this primary feeling sort of stuff. Partly because if we get to Saturday, Jeff, and you still want to work on this, then this will be some of our Constellation work this weekend. But we weren't going to dive into a Constellation now, so I felt a little bit of a need to do a little bit more than simply get the issue something better with my daughter. So that's why I went a little bit more with it. So I want to do a little bit of, the other thing is that when I'm dealing with a relationship that's contemporary, father and daughter, I might be happy to not do a full family tree interview. Because it's something this is often the case with couples. I'll do a little bit, but I'm not necessarily going to be exhaustive. So I'm not quite sure how far I'm going to go with this. But it did seem, the other thing, Irina and Jeff, I want you to both notice is that Jeff brought up one ancestral thing, his mother, and being a single child, that could be relevant. It's the thing that spontaneously came up without me asking about families, right? So the fact that Jeff was single, an only child, that is, that could be something, it's got a little resonance in it. I don't know if you feel it, Irina, but it's got a little bit of something in it. The bond between mother and Jeff that's implied there, there's something going on maybe with Angie and Angie's mother, but a not so pretty version of it. Yeah. So this, Angie's mom wanting to keep Angie for herself sort of a little bit, as Jeff put it earlier on.
No, not for herself, from me.
From you.
Yeah. Her relationship with her sucked too.
Okay. Well, Angie's sounding like she's had a difficult gig.
Yeah.
Sounds rough. The other thing, by the way, just to note, and I may or might not say this during an interview, following an abortion is a difficult gig right off the bat. So that already has my attention. That's a lost one, right? In the category of family traumas, secrets, and lost ones. Abortions are almost always lost ones. Every once in a while, a family comes along and they've dealt with it really, really well and very forthrightly. But it's pretty rare, because in our culture, abortions aren't supposed to matter. And so we don't tend to deal with them.
Well, and I can't even I don't feel like I can even tell Angie about it because the mother's remarried into kind of an industrial strength Catholic family.
I am not talking about you telling Angie. Angie knows it at an unconscious level.
Yeah.
Right?
But and that, I gotta believe that causes some kind of problem.
Yeah. But we can address in a Constellation without you having to have a conversation with Angie about it.
No,
because it's about you and your wife having a different relationship with the abortion, not Angie. Right? Angie's just the second born, which is the thing you need to hold in your heart, that Angie's the second one. Angie's the second. She's not the first. I just did a mini Constellation. Something there just went, phew. You were saying, Irina, what makes for a resolution? Yeah? I don't know what makes for a resolution, but that's a little mini. Jeff just held in his heart, Angie's number 2. And his son is number 3. And the aborted child is number 1. Something shifted a little bit. Did you feel that yourself, Jeff?
I'm not sure.
For me, I felt it when I said to you, Angie's second. I felt the gears kind of going, huh. And she's stuck.
Well, I mean, I've known that for a while.
Yeah, but I bet she's treated as first in the family.
I'm not sure what that means, but yeah, I would assume.
Yeah, I mean, I would too. I mean, generally that's the way it's done, right? Okay. So, you are an only child. You have no lost siblings to your knowledge.
That's my knowledge.
Any other major traumas in your family tree?
Well, until very recently, I knew nothing whatsoever about my family tree, but I started doing some tracing. My mother's, hard to find much on my father's side. I just couldn't find anything, but or very little. But on my mother's side, her father died fairly young. I believe he was an alcoholic who the story I heard when growing up, and it wasn't even a story, it was more like a sentence. It was like, oh yeah, Grandpa slept out on the back lawn and caught pneumonia and died. That was it. Never heard another word about it. But from some clues that surfaced in my mind at various times over the years, it seems likely that Grandpa was an alcoholic who passed out on the back. They lived in a northern clime. Who passed out on the back lawn, got pneumonia, and died.
Wow.
And there were three. My mother had an older sister and an older brother. So I kind of look at that as someone who was excluded or lost or whatever.
Sure.
That's, and on my father's side, I did find out that I had very little contact with any relative, just brief introductions here when I was very small. But I did find out that the person he introduced to me to as his father was actually his stepfather.
So you don't know what happened with his father?
I don't know what happened except that the mother and my grandmother and he split for some reason, and the stepfather raised the three kids. He didn't adopt them; they kept the same name.
And then was your father
mentioned that was the case?
Was your father much in your life? You haven't mentioned him as a father. You've mentioned your mother as a mother, but
he died when I was 15.
Of
massive heart attack, face down in the soup kind of thing.
Okay, so we have a tradition here, which I suspect Arena has picked up on, of lost or absent fathers. Mm-hmm. You lost your father lost his father, your mother lost her father, and Angie kind of lost her father a bit.
Hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, it's like, this is the gifts of interviews. Yeah. So,
the funny thing is I knew nothing of any of this until about 2 or 3 weeks ago when I started investigating with the family or the genogram things, and going back and looking at census records and stuff.
So it's time. Yeah.
Apparently.
How present was your father before he died? Was he a good close dad? Was he a distant dad?
We were super close, but we were on good terms. I mean, he was always there.
And how was it for your mom that your dad died?
I think that was pretty hard for her.
I would think.
Um, she never really got involved. I think, except for one brief relationship that didn't ultimately go anywhere. But after that, she was pretty much just on her own. And of course, I got to be, to some extent, the man of the house.
Yeah. And how did you and your mom grieve your father? Was there a funeral? What was what?
Yeah, there was a funeral, the whole works. I don't remember being terribly sad or upset. To me, it just kind of, I mean, it was a shock to hear about it at first, but then it was just, well, okay, he's gone. Wish he wasn't, but
That's kind of odd.
I've always had, thinking back, I've always, I think I have unconventional beliefs about death. Is that it? Yeah, I can't.
It's not beliefs about death. It's the grief at losing a parent. And that's something that philosophical beliefs don't overrule. For a 15-year-old kid, not having dad around anymore should have been kind of a big deal. It's interesting.
I mean, it's not that I didn't wish it hadn't happened, but it is a little odd. I've thought about that from time to time. It's a little odd.
Yeah.
But I just always felt like, well, I couldn't have, I couldn't have explained it then, but I guess I just always felt like, well, he's still there. It's just I can't see him now, you know.
So, that's about where I'd end the interview, because I have plenty of what I need to get started. One could ask questions about immigration trauma.
My family goes way back into the 1800s.
I'm just using that as an example. I could ask about war. I could ask about other traumas. I could go through the list of things: a suicide, homicide, blah blah blah. Not going to do that. I feel like I have enough here. But before I end, I just invite you, Jeff, to just kind of move into your heart and hold a good place for both of your grandfathers and your own father.
I actually did a little mental constellation for my grandfather on my mother's side when we were doing back in the other course.
Yeah. And then hold in the same way your daughter's connection with her father, you. Notice all these fathers, and maybe even like, dear grandfathers and father, bless me in my fatherhood with my daughter. Something like that. And I think we might do, unless for some reason you don't want to, but on the weekend we might do more with this.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Okay. I tried to, reveal certain bits and my angle of thinking about stuff as I went through. But Irina, I don't know if your child is quieted enough, if you have any questions or comments about that. And Jeff, if you have any questions about it. Yeah, go ahead, Irina.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
So I just, not the questions, but you didn't said you shifted, but that's what that's what you usually do, like the interview first and then family tree interview. That was two separate parts. That's what you
I
did
can
right
barely
here.
hear.
More or less, yeah.
Oh, can you hear me?
I can
Yes.
barely hear you.
Oh, okay, me.
I can hear you just fine. So Jeff, you might turn your volume up a little bit.
Oh, okay. And what I was gonna ask, my brain just went blank.
So the two sides, the sort of issue, and then the family tree.
The family tree. Oh, and also when you were interviewing with the issue, I also, so I wonder why you didn't do more on abortion. As far as how did you feel about it? Like, would you like, would it be okay to ask more about it? I thought like I would probably want to know how like you felt about it, who was whose decision was it, you know, kind of more into that that topic.
I think that would be perfectly good to pursue.
Okay.
Just get a little bit more information about. Sure.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And also the emotion was, I was kind of also getting like hopelessness maybe as a, would it be more like primary
Jeff, I assume you're a self-aware person. So when I say this, I'm sure you're not going to be very surprised. Jeff's feelings don't go, right? So, he modulates kind of like this, whereas you and I might be able to do more of this, right? And so there's only a little bit I'm going to be able to do with this with Jeff. When I stepped into it with him, there's one point where he used the word, it's sad. And it was said without much feeling tone, but it actually seemed to have like this thing underneath it. So for me, the big thing was actually the sadness. And the sadness around not being able to have the kind of connection with his daughter you'd like to have, and to be able to be effective with her in the way he'd like to be. The other one is the fear. I mean, he kept coming back to, I just feel like I need to protect myself or watch out or make sure something doesn't happen. And the fact that kept coming back, that's why I ended up kind of underlining that with him towards the end of that part of the interview. And he acknowledged, yeah, there's something here I'm protecting myself from. And, so there's the fear, which he mentioned explicitly several times, not in a very fearful way, more in a thought kind of a way, but still, he's using the word. And the sadness. Those were the two pieces for me. And yes, helplessness and powerlessness were very much in there. You bet.
So fear and sadness were primary.
Those, well, all feelings, they're all primary. So there's two different meanings of the word primary. All feelings can be primary. The helplessness is a primary feeling if you get underneath it, or it can be a secondary feeling if you're only kind of like I'm helpless, right? And then there's another meaning of primary, by which we mean the most important, the most important ones in this situation. So for me, my attention was going to fear and sadness, but helplessness is very important too. Yeah. Trying to nudge Jeff a little bit more into primary feelings. We're only going to get so far. And so what I'm looking forward to is the constellation itself supporting that continued movement for him. Yeah. Because he was giving me a little bit of I was losing rapport a little bit. I should have said that. When I was asking, what's underneath that or what's the fear, staying in rapport around that was a little tricky. And so I pulled back a little bit on it.
Right. And also when you said it's kind of odd with the I was thinking it could come off if you, because you know Jeff and you already have that relationship, but if you didn't, it could be like a judgment also.
Right. That was a pace lead, and it was a little risky. And so when I first sort of brought it up, I was really tracking how he was doing with it.
And it didn't bother me. I mean, I think it's still, I thought it's a little odd from time to time.
Yeah. Right. And Jeff doesn't go fully out of rapport. He's a very agreeable guy. You know, I bet you and I are way easier to kick out of rapport than Jeff is. Right? Because Jeff is just, he's kind of like this.
Very stable.
Yeah. So he's not someone, you'd have to work pretty hard to really like rub his fur the wrong way, which is kind of what not being in rapport is, to rub someone's fur the wrong way. And it's better to stay in better rapport if you can, as much as you can. But yeah, there were a few moments there, because that's the pace lead. Like, in this moment, can I lead Jeff into a slightly bigger frame or a newer frame about what he's talking about? In NLP, we call those reframes. And I'm trying to do that in interviews. They prepare the client for the constellation a little bit. If you can land a few reframes.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Reframes are just giving people new meanings. That's all. And so there were several moments. Irina pointed out one, the one about, that's a little kind of odd, about not grieving your dad much. Or the one about just noticing the self-protection a little bit. And you took that one very well. I said, it sounds like, you want to protect yourself a little bit here. And you went, yeah, I do. But I'm not sure you'd ever actually like named it that way for yourself. So it was just a little bit. Another reframe was around, and I tried this and it only landed a little bit. It didn't go completely in, was I'm wondering as a dad whether it's hard that you haven't been able to help her more. That one. So those are little reframes, just little things I see that are opportunities to, as they'll be kind of lubrication for the constellation. Yeah. And I don't push, in the interview, I'm not pushing too hard. I'm not trying to make too much happen. Just a little bit here and there. Reframes are any time when someone says something, you say to your friend like, I'm terrible, I'm always late. And your friend says, you're not always late, you're just always so in the moment. That's why, and you're like, oh, and it just feels, you're like, oh yeah, I'm just, I'm kind of always in the moment. And it's a different meaning. You've made a different meaning about yourself. And that's a reframe. Yeah. Other questions? Any other things you noticed, Irina?
I'm just curious, are you building your hypothesis as you're interviewing, or like is this starting to kind of come together?
Yeah. I had what I would call mini hypotheses the whole time I was going through. I think that's just the way the human brain works. I wonder if it's about this. I wonder if it's about that. I wonder if it's about this other thing. I mean, in the very beginning, he was describing his wife's relationship with his daughter, and I came up with a mini hypothesis that I ended up scrapping as I heard more. And then there was something he said about being a single child, and I'm like, oh, I wonder if there's something there. But it really came home when, when I did the family tree, and all these fathers were missing. And here's the deal. I'm going to presuppose, you may cover your ears now, Jeff, I don't know. I'm going to presuppose that his pattern with his daughter is Jeff's. And his wife played the role she needed to play for Jeff to have his pattern with his daughter. And that Jeff and his wife signed up for the deal together. Jeff's seen me do this enough times in Constellations that he can't be fully surprised. Yeah. But in some way, he had to find a partner who would guarantee this lost father thing and have it make some kind of sense.
Without actually dying.
Without actually dying, exactly, which is a step up. This is an improvement, right? Right? And you're both alive. This relationship remains recoverable and revisable. Yeah? I mean, to me, it's really interesting. The quality of self, this is the other thing that I noticed that got me curious, but I realize I'm only bringing it to consciousness now. The quality of self-protection you have in your relationship with your daughter, Jeff, when I step into your relationship with you and your daughter, I can't feel the danger you feel. To me, this relationship feels so close to being fixed. Like it's right there. And that's part of my conviction that this is really revisable.
When you said danger, that didn't resonate. It's like, but it's, oh God, not this again.
Right. Yeah, danger is my word.
Yeah.
It's a classic. I used my word for something that doesn't feel right to him, my map. But there's something, nonetheless, you're protecting yourself from.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Right, yeah. See, no, those are his words, so that works.
So why is it that this pattern only shows up with his daughter but not his son?
I don't know. I would need a longer conversation. I don't know.
Okay.
Maybe because even though she's not the first one, she is the firstborn. And she absorbed the pattern.
Okay.
Sometimes the first kids absorb the parents.
They take more.
They're two different. When you're at the end, two things can happen. One of two things can happen. Either the earlier kids scooped up all the issues and the last one does best. This is not uncommon. Or they didn't scoop up enough and the last one scoops up everything that hasn't been scooped up yet and they do the worst. I've seen both. We haven't talked about his son. He may have other problems that he may have from his mother. So there's more than one issue to be absorbed here.
Yeah, he definitely has problems.
Yeah. I mean, Bert Hellinger's, I can't quite make this fit with the abortion, but Bert Hellinger's rule is that firstborn takes on father's pain and secondborn takes on mother's pain.
And third, what about third?
Again, either sort of drafts between them and does better or scoops up what's left.
Awesome. I see.
I was third. I was a little bit of both. Yeah. So it's often the firstborn one who has the issues with dad and this, not the issues with, that's not the way to put it, picks up unresolved father's pain, and the next one picks up unresolved mother's pain. So.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And this is a incredibly general. I mean, there are exceptions everywhere, right? Of all kinds. So please don't see it as a hard and fast rule. And obviously, how's the little one doing, Arena?
She's sleeping now.
Oh, thank you, Jeff. I wasn't going to do an interview with you.
You're
I
gonna-
just decided
You put her to sleep.
yeah, we put her to sleep. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're doing very well, by the way, for having to deal with that and listen. Jeff and I applaud you. That's really something.
I stay present as much as I can.
You did a pretty good job there. I could tell you were connecting.
Yeah.
And if there's anything you missed, the recording is here. But at any rate, I had decided to just pursue that and not try and interview you. And I'm guessing you're tired now, so I'm not going to interview you now.
Yeah, no.
But we can pick this all up on the weekend. So we can end a few minutes early. Any lingering questions from this? Jeff, Arena, we will jump into the weekend at 10 a.m. on Saturday. Any questions about any of this?
Yeah, I had a question about your structure. So because I've seen this when the group comes together, like you said, and you don't know anybody, or like you haven't interviewed before, and then you interview kind of on a spot, right? And those just very short, I don't even know how people do, like constellate from that. Sometimes, because there's so little information. But then if you do personal one, you interview with, you said like 45 minutes, or is it 45 minutes each or 45 minutes together? Because
for each client. So have you ever been to my Berkeley events, Arena?
Yeah. One.
So all those clients have a 30 to 45 minute interview on the phone individually. And they get a little questionnaire ahead of time. And it's basically what I did with Jeff, although it might be a little longer. I got a little curious about Angie's mother's side of the family, just to see if there's anything there affecting Angie's relationship with her father. And also, as you said, maybe to look at the abortion just a little bit more. And I just, any wars, any immigrant trauma, I just go through the list. And I can role model that this weekend, perhaps with you, and an issue with you. I'll do the longer interview, and both you and Jeff can see what that looks like. Now, this was pretty long. This was 30 minutes.
Right.
Maybe a little bit longer than that. So sometimes, I get this key information and I don't do more.
Right.
But usually I do. I just sort of, it was funny at Mount Shasta last weekend. The guy was getting married. He had issues with his fiance. I did an interview with him. It was focused on his dad. And it was going quite beautifully, but halfway through, he said, "This is really nice with me and my dad," because they were having a nice reconciliation. He said, "Because he committed suicide." And I looked at him and I went, "Why didn't you tell me that before?" I mean, that's kind of a big piece of information. And it was actually ended up being really central to the constellation. But it had sort of come up underneath anyway, without it being explicitly that. So in the short interviews, you can miss something that is glaring, and you can't believe they left that out, but they did. So that's why sometimes the thorough interview can be helpful.
And also, there's a difference between if you do a short interview, then everybody hears it, right? A representative hear it.
At NLP Marin, they actually will take people aside. So they'll choose the person, and then they'll go off, and people just sit in the circle and talk and hang out until the facilitator's done doing the interview. So
because I've noticed when I came to that Constellation in Berkeley and we didn't know the issue, it kind of helped. It in a way it helps because you don't, as a representative, you're not as heady with the information. So kind of like that you don't, as a representative, don't know.
Yeah, and that was, I'm the only person I know, and now some people who have watched me are doing it, but I believe I am the innovator of doing a pre-constellation interview the way I do. And the way I stumbled on it was I started doing these events, and the very first one I planned to spend the first 10 minutes interviewing this guy, but I was trying to welcome people and give them directions and where's the bathroom, and I thought, I've got to come up with a different solution for this, and it would just work better for me if I just did it ahead of time. As far as I know, I'm the only one who does this. Unless you do one-on-one constellations, in which case, of course, it's the way you do it. You know, either in your office or on Zoom or whatever, because you're doing it at the same time you're doing the constellation with the person.
Right.
And so most contexts are the ones that you've seen, which is you find out who the client is and you do it right then. You do the interview right then.
In the group, right? That's
Or you take them aside.
Right.
Which I have seen. And you just tell the group, talk to each other for the next 10 minutes. We'll be back. And then they do it that way. So that's another way to do it.
Yeah, maybe it kind of helps representatives not to get into stories. I mean, maybe, I don't know.
Particularly new ones. I had that in Mount Shasta this weekend. One woman was going, she was in a role and saying, I'm trying to think about what it would be like to be a woman who blah, blah, blah. And I went, no.
Right.
Forget about that. Yeah. It especially with new folks, it can be people can forget what it is that they're up to, even though you've role modeled it a bunch and you've helped them figure it out and you've told them what it is.
Yeah, we're kind of like thinking culture, right? It's all about like this mind.
Yeah. And you'll figure out once you start offering your services, you'll figure out your way of interviewing. And as you'll see, basically I have enough services now that I do it different ways for different contexts. And that's the best thing, is to be able to be flexible. After years of doing the 45-minute phone interviews, I found I was really bad at the 5 or 10-minute interview and just doing something with people. And so I had to relearn how to do that, because sometimes that's what you need to do. So it's useful to be able to do it in different kinds of ways. And in the beginning, sometimes doing the exhaustive interview is the way to start, just because it makes you feel solid about what you're doing.
Right. Although I personally get tired from talking. That's why it's traditional therapies.
Exactly.
You know? Exactly. I'm like, oh no, what? And following all the stories, it's really hard.
Well, this is why having some system, my notes are terrible. They're not going to show through very well. But having, you guys know how to do genograms?
I do, yeah.
Jeff, yes? Okay, so a little bit. I mean, you can make up your own system, but anything that sets up a family tree, you can create relationships. Yeah, there you go. Perfect, yeah.
I was looking for some software to do it. I found several packages and I tried a couple of them I didn't like, so I haven't found a good package yet.
Good luck. Let us know if you find something good.
I got one hopeful, but I have to actually buy it before I can try it. Some of them let you try it before you buy it, and I didn't like those. So.
Well, good luck to you on that. If you find something good, do let us know. Otherwise, I'm going to sign off here, guys. Arena's had a real night of it. We're going to let her rest with her baby. You're amazing that you're still asking questions and you're still in.
Yeah, multitasking.
Jeff, how are you? You've been interviewed. We've kind of opened up something. How are you doing?
Good. It's interesting. But damn it, I can't blame my ex-wife anymore. Thanks a lot.
Sure, you can keep blaming her. No problem.
No, it was good. It was interesting.
Good. Okay. Well, I will see you all at Saturday at 10 a.m. then. I sent you the instructions for the address, and I'll see you then.
Okay, Leslie, and you'll send the recording, right? So I'll watch the recordings for the parts
Okay, I
of
will do
this.
that.
Okay, thank you.
Okie dokes.
Okay, I'll see you
Bye.
Saturday.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.